Welcome to Late Night Story. When the world goes silent and shadows stretch longer, some stories awaken, whispered only to those still awake. So put on your headphones, turn down the lights, and let me guide you through the quiet hours. If you're listening alone, you're exactly where you need to be. If everyone can leave a comment to let me know where you are listening from in the world, don't forget to subscribe before you drift too far into the dark.
Story 1. I found home videos of my family that shouldn't exist. My brother died when I was 7 years old. He was 13. He drowned in the lake down the street from our house. My parents never touched his room. They tried once, but they couldn't do it. Too raw. After that, the door just stayed shut. His room became a kind of museum of him. That was 11 years ago. His room still looks the same. This morning, while I was packing for college, I thought I'd finally go in there. My plan wasn't anything dramatic. I just wanted to grab a few hoodies, maybe a keepsake or two to take with me. Something to hold on to when I got homesick. Full transparency, I've been in his room plenty of times before. I've sat on his bed. I've looked through his shelves. But I've never really gone digging. That felt wrong, and I really had no inclination to. I just miss my brother. That wasn't my intention today either. It wasn't my intention to find a stack of DVDs shoved into the bottom drawer of his dresser. There were 3 of them, just labeled 1, 2, and 3. The only DVD player in the house is still hooked up to his old TV. Everything else went streaming years ago. For a minute, I told myself not to do it. They weren't mine. They probably didn't matter. I picked up some of the items I had collected, put the DVDs back in his drawer, and returned to my room. Tonight, they started calling to me. I know how that sounds. I know you're thinking it was just my curiosity eating at me. But it wasn't like that. It felt physical. A pull in my chest. So I crept back across the hall, slipped into his room, locked the door behind me so my parents wouldn't hear, and I put in the first DVD. It was a home video. I didn't even know we had any. I don't remember my parents ever owning a camera. The video starts with static, then clears just enough to show something. The picture is muddy, warped by tracking lines. It could be the living room, but the furniture looks wrong. Everything is too big or too small, shifting every time the frame jitters. Sometimes it almost looks like a bedroom, sometimes like a hallway. No faces, no clear shapes, just flickering shadows that don't match what the voices are saying, because there are voices. Familiar ones, laughter, clinking dishes, and my mom calling my brother's name. It sounds like family in the background, just out of sight. I hear my brother's laughter, and the sound swallows me whole. It rings through my head, bouncing off the bones that make up my skull. Then, beneath it is another voice. Low, deliberate, close enough that you couldn't miss it. You haven't noticed yet. Then the video cut off, just like that. I scrambled to rewind it, not even thinking about the other 2 discs still stacked under the TV. I just wanted to hear him laugh again. That laugh. I try not to think about the end, though the fear of it was crawling slowly up my spine as I hit play. Because the way it spoke, it sounded like it wasn't part of the recording at all, like it was speaking to the camera, to me. I pressed play again, this time pausing every few seconds, desperate to make sense of what I was seeing. But nothing held still. Everything on the film looked almost familiar, like a room you swear you've been in but can't place. The walls are a little too narrow, and the colors are washed out enough to make it something you've never seen before. It made me feel like my brain was short-circuiting. Then I froze the frame just before the moment he laughed. And there it was, a caption, faint and yellow, burned into the corner of the screen. July 30th, 2015. 7 months after my brother drowned. My first thought was that it was a glitch. It had to be. The camera must have been off by a year. There's no other explanation. I forced myself to breathe and to shove back the rising panic. Then I pressed play again. His laugh filled the room, and for a second, my fear washed away. It was just him again. He was alive, warm, present. A bittersweet rush of comfort and grief. But then the voice returned. Closer this time. Went against the microphone, broken and cutting in and out like static. You notice. I ripped the DVD out of the player and threw it across the room. I don't even know why I did it. Adrenaline, I guess. My hands were shaking so hard I couldn't control myself. I'm trying to think of logical explanations. I want to believe there's one. But every reason I come up with feels paper thin. I just bolted back to my room and dove under the covers. Like that would help. I don't want to watch the other videos. I don't. But I can feel them pulling at me. Like they're not finished. Like I owe them something. I can't sleep. It's dark. It's late. The rain just started. The bathroom faucet always drips. But tonight it sounds so much louder. You could almost confuse it for footsteps. Story 2. 20 years ago, a child went missing. 2 months ago, I found him. I don't know what I'm doing posting this to a damn internet forum, but I need to get out somehow. Maybe writing it all down and posting it online will help. I doubt it, but it's worth a shot. Here goes nothing. My name's Daniel Mathis. I used to be a detective, but I retired 2 months back. Well, maybe retired isn't the right word. Forced to quit is more like it. Either way, I'm not on the force anymore. That's enough about me, though. If I'm going to tell this story properly, then I need to start at the beginning, the very beginning. It started 20 years ago. A child went missing. A little boy, only 10 years old. His name was Johnny. I'd worked on a few missing person cases before, but this one was different. Johnny was walking back from school with some of his friends. It was getting dark, so he decided to take a shortcut through the woods. His friends were too scared to follow, so Johnny went alone. Needless to say, he never made it home. His parents reported him missing a few hours later. We searched the area for days. We questioned every sex offender in a 15-mile radius. Hell, we combed through every inch of that damn forest, but we never found him. Whoever took Johnny was smart about how they did it. They knew how to cover their tracks. It was almost like the kid vanished into thin air. Flash forward a month to mid-January, and I'm knocking on his parents' front door. It was snowing that day. I remember Paul, the kid's father, answered the door. He looked tired, as if he hadn't slept in weeks. Despite this, he still made an effort to be polite. He gave me a weary smile and shook my hand. "Detective Mathis, come in," he said. "My wife's in the living room." His wife, Erin, was sitting with her back to me, staring at the TV. On the screen was a recording of Johnny, taken a couple months before he disappeared. It was grainy and blurry, the way home videos are. He had bright orange hair, freckles, and green eyes, just like his mother in the video. He was dressed in a puffy jacket and playing around in a pile of leaves. It must have been taken in their front yard. Mommy, watch this," he yelled, getting a running start before leaping head first into the pile of leaves. He burst out a few seconds later, stray foliage clinging to his hair. "Wow, sweetie," Erin's voice said from behind the camera. Johnny flashed a beaming smile, showing off the gap between his front teeth, before preparing to jump into the leaves once again. I stood in the doorway to the living room, watching the video unfold. Once it reached its end, Erin started it from the beginning. It was only a few seconds long. She gazed into the TV, rubbing her necklace with her thumb, silently whispering along. "Dear," Paul said, shaking her from her trance. "Detective Mathis is here." Erin looked over and paused the video. "Please, take a seat," Paul said, gesturing to a chair. Both he and Erin sat on the couch across from me, his hand holding hers as I started to speak. "Mr. and Mrs. McLean, I'm sorry, but I'm afraid that it is not good news. We have to call off the search for Johnny." Erin broke down immediately, sobbing into her hands. Paul squeezed his eyes shut, trying to stop himself from doing the same. To be honest, I felt like crying as well. I fought to keep it going for as long as I possibly could. But, well, Johnny's been missing for a month now, and we've run out of leads. We're going to keep the case open, but until any new evidence comes to light, well, there's nothing we can do. The living room was filled with the sound of Aaron's wails. Paul tried his best to comfort her, but he was barely keeping it together himself. "You promised." Aaron started to shout. "You promised you would bring him home." "Mrs. McLean, I am Dash." "Why can't you bring him home?" she screamed. She rose to her feet and stormed upstairs, leaving Paul and I alone in the living room. "I'm sorry. I really am," I muttered, unable to look him in the eye. Paul wiped the tears away from his face before rising to his feet. "I think you should leave." I looked up at him, opening my mouth to say something, but no words came out. I simply nodded my head and rose to my feet. Paul was barely fighting back his tears as I left. As soon as I shut the door behind me, I could hear him break down and start to sob. Paul and Aaron both died 15 years later. Paul started drinking and never stopped. Aaron drove her car off a bridge in the middle of the night and drowned. I don't think they ever forgave me. Not really. To them. I was always a detective that failed to bring their child home. It was the 20th anniversary of the kid's disappearance, December 5th, when I came home to a letter. It had no return address or any distinguishing features. It was just a plain white envelope. There was no way it could have been delivered by a mailman. Someone dropped it off personally. I still have it somewhere, but I don't need to read it again to remember what it said. The words are branded into my brain like a hot iron. I sat at my dining room table, cut the envelope open, and started to read. "Dear Detective Mathis, if things were different, I would have written this letter to Johnny's parents. I regret that I never got the opportunity to explain this to them. I know they never would have been able to understand, but I would have liked to explain it regardless. Enough about that, though. With them gone, I have decided that the only one worthy of my confession is you. I watched you search for me, you know? I watched your interviews on the news. I watched as every lead you had went cold. In fact, I've seen you in person. You wouldn't have noticed me. I would have just been another face in the grocery store or on the street. But I noticed you. I always noticed you, Detective Mathis. I am sure you've figured it out by now, but I am the one who took Johnny. I am the one who snatched him away in the woods 20 years ago. I still remember how I lured him into my car. I remember how I knocked him unconscious. I remember how much I was shaking. I want you to know that I never touched him. Not like that. Anyway, I want that to be known. On the back of this letter are coordinates. Follow them and more will be revealed. And if you tell the police about this, you will be throwing away your only chance to do right by Johnny. No more mysteries. No more games. It's time you learned why I did what I did. I sat there reading and rereading that letter for what felt like hours. There were two possibilities. Either the person who took Johnny 20 years ago really had sent me a letter confessing his guilt, or someone was messing with me, and I did not know which was worse. I flipped the letter over and looked at the coordinates, careful not to touch the paper too much. If this really was written by the person who took Johnny, I wanted to preserve the prints. Staring at the coordinates, my first instinct was to call the station, but then another thought came into my mind. I knew that if I showed up with other cops and the guy who took Johnny was there, he'd just get arrested. If I went by myself, I knew I could give him what he really deserved. No witnesses, no one to stop me from putting a bullet in his head. Besides, I could have just said it was self-defense. This man put Johnny's parents through hell. I wasn't about to pass up the opportunity to put him in the ground. I took a picture of the coordinates and plugged them into Google Maps. It was about a 30-minute drive, located deep in woods outside of town. I threw on my coat, grabbed my gun, and raced out to my car. I'm surprised I didn't get pulled over with how fast I was going. As I sped down the interstate, the leather on my steering wheel creaked beneath my grip. My knuckles turned white, and I caught myself grinding my teeth together. I thought about what the letter said, how he bragged about seeing me in public. How many times had I walked past this guy? How many times had I passed by someone on the street corner, and that someone was him? I wasn't a cop at this point. I didn't have my badge or my lights on. I was just angry and ready to kill a man. Eventually, I turned onto an old dirt road. I followed the directions until I came upon a trail into the woods. Parking the car, I grabbed the flashlight from my glove box and stepped out. It was twilight and the forest was quiet, blanketed beneath a thick layer of snow. Not even the birds were making a sound. It was that kind of silence you only find in the dead of winter. As I trudged through the woods, I only became more furious. I imagined what it must have been like when Johnny was brought here. A million questions raced through my mind. Was he unconscious as he was dragged through the snow? Was he even alive? Did he leave a trail of blood? Or was he wrapped tightly in a garbage bag? The coordinates took me off the trail and deep into the woods. I didn't even consider if I was going to be able to find my way back. I only had one thing on my mind. Finally, I reached the coordinates, only to find nothing. It was just a small clearing. Snow-covered ground, bare trees, and the dark sky hanging above. I shined my flashlight around, desperately searching for something, anything. I double-checked my phone to make sure I was at the right spot. I was stumbling over to a dead log laying up against a small hill. I sat down. I buried my face in my hands and wiped away a few tears as my breath disappeared into clouds of vapor. The snow came up to my ankles, and the cold seeped through my boots. I slammed my fist down onto the decaying wood. I did it again. Then again. I shot to my feet and spun around, screaming into the empty forest as I furiously stomped down on the log. The dry wood splintered and cracked beneath my boot as I yelled every profanity I could think of after what must have been my 10th kick. My foot broke through the hollow log and slammed into something behind it. Something metal. I stumbled back, my foot throbbing in pain. Shining my light through the newly formed hole in the log, I saw a rusted metal surface hiding beneath it. I frantically rolled the log aside, the wood breaking apart as I revealed what was underneath. Brushing the snow aside, I realized that what I was staring at was the entrance to a bunker. My breathing was heavy as I tugged on the latch. To my surprise, it was unlocked. The heavy door groaned as I swung it open. I was greeted with stone steps leading down into the dark. Shining my light, I saw just how deep this bunker was. It must have gone down 10 or 15 feet before the steps finally stopped and gave way to an unlit hallway. Drawing my gun, I took a deep breath and started down the steps, leaving a trail of snow and mud behind me. I reached the bottom of the stairs and shined my light down the hallway. At the end of the hall was a large metal door. My own breath was deafening as I approached. Against the wall, next to the door, was a dial. Holding my flashlight in the crook of my neck, I turned it. I flinched as some sort of intercom screeched on, blaring an old and grainy rendition of When Johnny Comes Marching Home. It began with deafening drums and an ear-piercing whistle before giving way to a cacophony of voices. When Johnny comes marching home again, hurrah, hurrah. Stuffing my gun into my holster, I clasped my hands over my ears as the sound of an entire choir echoed throughout the bunker. We'll give him a hearty welcome then, hurrah, hurrah. Pushing the metal door open, I stumbled into a room beyond and frantically looked for the source of the music. The men will cheer, the boys will shout, the ladies, they will all turn out, and we'll all feel gay when Johnny comes marching home. At the far end of the room was a computer with multiple monitors, one of which was hooked up to a loudspeaker, and we'll all feel gay when Johnny comes marching age. I grabbed the wire and ripped out of the speaker, abruptly stopping the music, with the song no longer playing. I looked around to get a feel for my surroundings. I was in a concrete room with low ceilings and flickering fluorescent lights. It looked like an old hospital ward. The counters were populated by scalpels, operating tools of various sizes, and syringes. In the center of the room was an operating table adorned with leather straps. The whole room smelled like rubbing alcohol. The lights in the ceiling did a poor job at illuminating things, making the whole bunker feel claustrophobic and suffocating. The wall on the left was like something you would see in a mystery film. Hundreds of pieces of paper pinned to a notice board. Some of them had notes furiously scribbled down in handwriting I could barely decipher. Others, however, looked like printed off images of star systems. A picture of the Milky Way hung next to an old newspaper clipping from 20 years ago that read, "Strange lights spotted in the night sky." The wall opposite that was, in fact, not a wall, but rather a glass divider, separating this section of the room from whatever was beyond it. Behind the glass was a thick blue mist, so dense that I couldn't even begin to see what was on the other side. "Johnny, are you here?" I shouted, running up the glass and trying to peer through. Stepping back, I looked around the room in search of something to break the glass. That's when I saw it. On one of the computer screens was a recording title from Mathis. Approaching the screen, I moved the mouse over it and clicked play. "Hello, Detective Mathis." My grip on my gun tightened when I finally heard his voice. For 20 years, I had imagined what this monster sounded like. Finally hearing it felt surreal. The voice was slightly garbled by a modulator, but I could still tell that he was around my age, mid-60s at most. "If you're listening to this, then you read my letter. If you were hoping to arrest me, or maybe even kill me, I am sorry to disappoint you. I have taken exhaustive steps to cover my tracks. Even if you manage to find my identity, I will be long gone by then." I clenched my jaw, imagining how satisfying it would feel to choke him out. I am sure you have many questions, and I think that this recorder will answer most of them. But before I can explain anything, I think it is best to introduce you to someone. With that, the chamber behind the glass divider began to hiss. The fog quickly dissipated, and the room beyond was revealed. I don't think I'll ever be able to forget what I saw when the mist fully cleared. I still see it. Every time I close my eyes, every time I fall asleep, I see that thing. On the other side of the glass, there was I don't even know what to call it. It looked vaguely humanoid, but its limbs were more akin to an arachnid. Countless fingers with numerous joints sprawled forth from its palms like a spider web. Its skin was brown and covered in a thick layer of slime that dripped down onto the floor. Its emaciated torso was hollow, its ribs curling outward to form a central cavity that bellowed slightly as the thing quietly breathed. "Detective Mathis," said the recording, "meet the basilisk. Whether that is its true name or simply what it has chosen to be called is beyond me." As my eyes traveled over the creature's horribly misshapen and grotesque form, I saw something that made my heart sink into my stomach. Encased within its open rib cage was a body. It was small, frail, and wrapped in a cocoon of sinew. It dripped with a strange fluid, and parts of its discolored skin seemed to be merging with the creature itself. Taking a step toward the glass, I let out a quiet gasp when I saw the strands of orange hair hanging from its scalp. "Johnny," I whispered. To my horror, one of his green eyes fluttered open, his irises bloodshot. He looked at me for a split second before his pupil rolled back into his head, and he started to thrash about. He was alive. He was fucking alive. Through the glass, I could hear horrible, excruciating groans. I pray I never have to hear anything like that again. They reverberated off the walls of the bunker, the choked sobs of a child crying not because he is sad or because he needs attention, but because he is in pain. I pressed my hand against the glass and fought back tears as I watched Johnny, the boy I thought had been dead for 20 years, writhe in agony before my eyes. Suddenly, his screams were overpowered by a low groan. A strange clicking noise filled the room as the many elongated fingers of the basilisk began to twitch. After a few seconds, Johnny's muffled screams were silenced. His eye fluttered shut and he went still. As he stopped moving, so did the basilisk. "Johnny? Johnny!" I screamed, pounding on the glass. Neither he nor the creature responded. Incredible, isn't it? The recording spoke again. "The basilisk came to me 20 years ago. Its spacecraft descended from the stars before my very eyes." I was barely listening to the recording at this point. My eyes were fixated on Johnny as he lay motionless inside the creature's chest. Do you want to know the interesting part, Detective Mathis? When it came to me, I was a dying man. Brain cancer. Stage 4. Inoperable. His voice seemed sullen before perking up as he continued. "The basilisk cured me. I should have died years ago, but it halted my tumor in its tracks. I began to look around the room, searching for some way into the chamber, but I found nothing. Johnny was completely sealed off. Can you see it? The fluid that it is secreting? In that fluid lies the cure to cancer. Can you imagine a world where we do not have to fear such a horrid fate? The enzymes in that fluid were the key. I knew that if I could isolate them, learn how to replicate it, I could make cancer a thing of the past, and the basilisk was willing to help me. The voice paused for a second, and I could hear the man let out a sigh. Except, it needed something from me. It wanted a child. I replayed that part in my head more times than I care to admit. It never fails to make me sick. The basilisk is a creature of the abstract. It feeds off futures that never were. And there is no one who has more potential or imagination for the future as a child. Johnny is alive in there. The basilisk is keeping him alive, keeping his psyche trapped in the body of a child, dreaming of the future he never had. I know your first instinct will probably be to try and pull him out, but that won't save him. The basilisk has been feeding off of Johnny for 20 years. They are merged in body and mind. If you separate them, they both will die. I started to cry. I stumbled back and leaned against the operating table, unable to peel my eyes away from the glass. The voice sighed deeply. I know you think I'm a monster, Detective Mathis, but I stand by what I've done. Do you know why? He sounded so arrogant, so damn smug. Because I figured out how to replicate the enzymes. In a few years, I will have a cure to every type of cancer there is. Do you know how many children die of cancer every year? Nearly 100,000. Nearly 2 million children have died in agony since I first took Johnny, since I gave him to the basilisk. I had to do this. I have a duty to save as many as I can. And the basilisk never would have helped me if I hadn't given it a child. I sacrificed one so I could save millions. No matter how hard I tried, I could not look away from the display on the other side of the glass for more than a few seconds. The otherworldly, incomprehensibly twisted form of the basilisk, Johnny's nearly unrecognizable body, trapped within. If I had gone to the government, the voice began again, they would have locked it away beneath the Pentagon. They would have tortured it. And if they ever realized the good it could do, they would have only given it to the rich, the 1% of the 1%, the corrupt, the greedy, and the perverted. I could hear the anger and bitterness in his voice. I'm going to give this cure to everyone, not just the wealthy. Soon, cancer will be a distant memory. Johnny has made a necessary sacrifice. His suffering has led to an unprecedented leap in medicine. As the recording continued, I approached the glass, looking at the emaciated husk huddled within the chest cavity. His eye opened again, only for a second. It looked around the room, seeming to follow the web of fingers clinging to the ceiling. In the second before he shut his eye again, I could see Johnny's pain, his fear. Now, the recording continued. The way I see it, you have a few options. You could call your precinct, but that would be foolish. If you show them the basilisk, the CIA won't be far behind. If they don't kill you, they will brainwash you into never speaking of this again. They will take both the basilisk and Johnny away for study. He will remain in his living hell, and it will be your fault. I looked down at the gun in my hand, running my thumb over the black metal. Your second option is to kill them, the recording said. Even though I knew they were coming, I felt my heart sink into my stomach as he said those words. I trust you brought your gun. The glass is not bulletproof, and neither is the basilisk. Just a few shots is all it should take. I am no fool. I know that if the basilisk is left unattended, it will eventually leave the bunker and begin searching for other children. Just like any junkie, the high will wear off and it will search for the next one. I could not bring myself to end its life. I worked with it for many years. It is practically my colleague. For the first time since the recording began, I detected a hint of compassion in his voice. So, it is up to you, Detective Mathis. You can put Johnny out of his misery and walk away. You can be satisfied knowing that you ended his suffering the only way you could. Alternatively, you could notify the government. You could risk your own life and doom Johnny to who knows how many more years of agony. You are a pragmatic man, much like myself. I trust you will make the correct decision. And with that, the recording was over. I was left in the bunker with nothing but the hum of fluorescent lights and the horrible abomination on the other side of the glass. Looking up from my gun, I saw Johnny staring at me, not with one eye, but both. Tears trickled down his cheeks as he gazed at me, his eyes pleading for something. I don't know what was going through his mind. I'm not even sure if he was still capable of thought after 20 years of torment. After a few seconds, the basilisk's fingers twitched again, and Johnny was pulled back into slumber. I looked down at my gun again. My hand was trembling. A few minutes later, I stepped out of the bunker and into the cold night. The chill nipped at my skin, and the barrel of my gun was still smoking. A light snow began to fall. As I sat down on the hollow log, I began to sob. I wiped at my eyes, but the tears kept coming. I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry, I cried. As I wept, I felt my gun's weight in my hand, 2 bullets lighter than when I had arrived. Story 3. My town was built around a lake. Nobody will admit the lake exists. Never acknowledge the lake. Never look at it. Never talk about it. Never so much as think about it. None of these rules were ever actually spoken out loud during my childhood. That would be acknowledging the lake. After all, but they were as clear as look both ways before crossing, or no candy for men with beards and tattoos. The city where I grew up is built along the shoreline of this massive, crystal clear lake, nestled in the mountains. Frankly, it's a great place to grow up. There's nationally renowned elementary schools, drug-free-ish, high schools, and nature trails in every direction. The population sits at around 50K, decent size, which makes it all the more incomprehensible that no one, not even those who just moved here, will admit the lake exists. One of my earliest memories is walking with my mom on one of the trails near our house, one that skirted the lake itself. I had to be young, 3 or 4 at most. I was yanking on her arm in that relentless way little kids do and begging her to let me go swim in the lake. There's nothing there. I remember her telling me over and over, nothing. At the time, I couldn't understand her reaction. My parents never lied to me. That was always their policy. Why wouldn't she look the direction I was pointing? Now though, looking back and filling in the blanks, I remember her jaw clenched tight, a sheen of sweat on her forehead, and determined eyes staring resolutely forward, refusing to see the water just along the trail. Terrified, I realize now that's what she looked like. When I was in 2nd grade, I had a best friend, Simon. We would spend each afternoon escaping our daily chores by riding our bikes, playing catch, or other equally irresponsible forms of reckless loitering. To quote my crabby widowed neighbor, there was this one particular hill on Sickle Street we loved to take our bikes down. It really was massive. We had to make sure no adults were watching us when we committed speeding violations down it, or they would flip out and screech at us to wear helmets. Each time we made the daring ride, we would do it just a bit faster than the last. Well, one day we did our fastest yet. We flew down the hill at a speed that would have killed us if we'd fallen, then hopped off our bikes at the bottom. Simon and I collapsed in the grass to cackle at our sheer, stupid audacity. We broke the sound barrier, I said through the laughter. Let's do it again, he said. I almost fell off. We laughed some more, then finally calmed until we were just sitting there, still giddy like we'd accomplished something monumental. It was such a good feeling of victory and unstoppability. Maybe that was why I said it. Do you think there's any fish in there? Huh? Simon asked. Sickle Street twisted to the right after the hill, but if you kept walking straight, you'd hit the lake. That was the view we had as we'd madly flown down the hill. The lake. Surely Simon had seen it. All these times he had to have noticed it. The lake. I pointed at it. Do you think there's any fish in it? He stared at me. Any hint of accomplishment was gone from his expression. I'd never brought the lake up with him before. Let's do the hill again, he said. There has to be, I continued. It's fresh water. It's huge. I've never seen anybody fishing in it. But I'm going home. There is the terror. The same thing I'd seen in everybody else when I dared to bring it up. Just look at it, though. You see it, don't you? I don't see anything, he said. But it's right there. Simon snapped. His face morphed into a mask of hideous anger. He shoved me backwards, and my elbow gashed against my handlebars when I fell. I thought that was it, that he'd release his anger, and now we could ride down the hill again, but instead, Simon kicked me. He rammed his foot into my side. There's nothing there. He kicked me again, and again, and again. I suspect a rib or two broke. Not sure though. I never told my parents what had happened. And ribs heal on their own. The next day in class, Simon wouldn't respond to me. When I would bike to his house to hang out, he never came to the door. He never attacked me again, but he never looked at me again either. I became like the lake to him, non-existent. Years passed. I mostly stopped bringing up the lake, but it was always there. Always this dark blue smudge at the bottom of my vision. When I looked at the mountains, I never did stop looking at it, but nobody else would. On walks, they would face the other way. They would comment on how pretty the mountains were, but never anything else. In school, when we learned about the water cycle, the class was dead silent with discomfort as similar to how it felt on our 4th grade sex ed day. Just talking about water made people think of it. Thinking about it made people tense. Why? I would theorize as I lay in bed at night. Why couldn't it exist? Some people even lived on it. A few of my friends had houses right on the shoreline with the water lapping at their backyards, but when we played, we would never get close. Their parents didn't build fences to block it off. So, might admit there was something that needed blocking. We simply ignored it. They simply ignored it, I should clarify. For years I wondered if I was crazy. That would make the most sense, even if I didn't have other hallucinations. Maybe somehow for this one, odd thing I unexplainably did. Except how would that explain people's constant nervousness? The catch in their throat when they turned too quickly and forgot to close their eyes? How would hallucinations explain how Simon reacted years ago? Eventually, I stopped thinking about it so much. It wasn't hard. I never stooped to ignoring the lake like everybody else, but it barely affected my life. Our city was a cozy place to grow up. It was easy to forget about this one. Dark ink blot, no matter how massive it might be. Every once in a while, though, my curiosity would bubble up. Once as a freshman, a new girl moved into our class halfway through the year. I cornered her after class, before she could make the cafeteria. So have you seen it? I asked. Hey, she said. Sorry, seen what? The lake. The girl stiffened. Her eyes went wide, and her hands started trembling. I don't know you, she said, and scurried away. She just moved here. How could she already know to pretend it didn't exist? Another time, just after I got my license, I stopped at a gas station to buy some lottery tickets. I know. You have to be 18 to buy those, yada yada, but I was friends with the cashier, and anyways, it's not like I was doing drugs, so let's all move past this, yeah? Maybe we'll get a winner this time, the cashier, Gerald, said. I'm impulsive, not stupid. Nobody ever wins with these things. Somebody does. I paused. I wish they did tell us who. Other states forced the lotto companies to announce it. I've heard. It might make me feel better about wasting my paychecks on these. Gerald shrugged. Some things you never get to know. Some things you have to live your whole life without an answer to. Somebody should put that on a motivational poster. After that, I stopped in the bathroom. When I came out, an unfamiliar woman was talking to Gerald at the counter. Just passing through. She said, never been here before, but the mountains are stunning. I followed her outside. Hey! I called out. The woman, holding her daughter's small hand, turned to me. You dropped this. I held out the woman's lost receipt. Even though nobody in the history of anywhere has ever cared about a lost receipt. Thank you, she said anyway. You're just passing through? Sorry, I have a tendency to overhear other people's conversations. No worries. I have a tendency to speak too loudly. And yes, I am. Could you do me a favor? I asked. The woman smiled amicably. Could you just tell me what that is? I pointed. Her eyes trailed towards it. The mountains? No. Beneath it. Her face snapped back to me, like Simon's had. It transformed to something twisted and furious, and she clamped her hands over her daughter's eyes. How dare you? She marched back to her car. The woman had never been here before. She'd barely even talked to anybody in our city, but she knew. Somehow she knew this grand, terrible secret that I didn't. Another year passed. It was my senior year, And my friends and I went to prom in a group of 8, me with my 6-month girlfriend. At the time, I knew it was ridiculous to think that Sherry, my girlfriend, and I would end up working out. She had college plans. I didn't. Now, though, looking back, I think we might have had a shot. I really do. The night was amazing. We danced until midnight. We snuck shots somebody had smuggled in behind the bleachers. By the time the teacher chaperones were shooing us out, we were giggly, buzzed, and not quite ready for it all to end. You'll be happy to hear, we at least had the good sense not to drive in our current state. We lived close anyways. So the 8 of us walked through the darkened suburb streets. No, Sherry said when we reached her best friend's house. Don't go in. Let's do something. Like what? We were all silent. None of our parents would be especially thrilled about hosting a group of intoxicated, underage teenagers. The nearest Denny's was miles away, and everywhere else was already closed. I know what we could do, I said. My words probably slurred. Something dangerous. It seemed to perk everybody up. Dangerous. In high school, that word was equivalent with fun. They followed me without questions down the street and through a grove of trees. We stood on the lake shore. Nobody spoke. Come on, I said. Why shouldn't we? Wordlessly, without deliberating. The 8 of us stripped down to our underwear and waded in. We didn't laugh. Our joking and giggling from before was over. Our senses sharpened and our brains seemed to clear. Nobody said the word lake. It was like, even in doing this, we still couldn't bring ourselves to admit it existed. We averted our gazes upwards and thought about other things. We were doing this, but we weren't. The lake existed, but it didn't. A little more? I asked Sherry. We were nearly chest deep. She nodded, and we waded further past the others until only our heads were dry. I never thought I'd be doing this. She gripped my hand. Why? You know why. But I don't. Sherry, I don't know. Everybody seems to know what's going on, except me. And I don't know how to ask or make them tell me. Why? Why can't we talk about? I felt it. Sherry's gasp in front of me told me she did too. Indescribable. Out of nowhere. Incorporeal. There was an immediate sense of wrongness. Something had shifted in the universe. But I didn't know what. Only that something had, and that we weren't supposed to be here. We weren't supposed to be doing this. We had to leave now. Now. The others were already rushing back to the shore. Sherry and I followed, half swimming, half running through the dark water. I almost expected something to grab me and drag me under, but nothing did. When we sprinted from the water, we were gasping and shuddering. Half of us were sobbing. We put back on our clothes and walked back to our houses in silence. Nobody would acknowledge what just happened or the presence we'd all felt. We all waved goodbye. In the morning, my friends were gone. I didn't know it until Monday when none of them were at school. Occasionally, my teachers would glance at their empty desks, then quickly away, as if they'd slipped up by looking. I tried texting each friend in turn, but each time the only message I received from any of them was, "Invalid number. This sender does not exist." After school, I rushed to Sherry's house and pounded on the door. Her mother answered. "Is Sherry here?" Her mother's eyes were vacant and red. "I don't know a Sherry." "What are you talking about? Your daughter? My girlfriend?" Sherry, her jaw trembled as if she was on the verge of bursting into tears. "I don't have a daughter." She shut the door. A decade has gone by. I never did end up leaving my hometown. That might sound crazy, but this city really is a good place to grow up. The people are nice. The mountains are beautiful, and the elementary schools are safe. That's all I want for my daughter, her safety. This is the best place to raise her. I just hope she isn't like me, though some part of me already knows she will be. She will question, be curious. Want to know why? I'll pretend the lake doesn't exist. I'll look away. Maybe if I ignore it enough, she will too. But if she doesn't, I've already resolved what to do. Once, just once, when she's old enough, I'll sit my daughter down. I will point at the lake and say, "Yes, it exists. No, you're not crazy." And then when she asks, "Why?" I will tell her the horrible truth, that some things you never get to know. Some things you have to live your whole life without an answer to. Story 4. Life of luxury? It's been 2 days. 2 days of that constant, rasping breath outside my bedroom door. It hasn't left. He, she, whatever the fuck it is, it's still there. It started on Tuesday. That stupid fucking forum. The text popped up on my phone as I was half dozing on the couch, half watching reruns on the TV's dead glow. Angie, my best friend, my anchor through every disaster life could throw. Angie, a dance with arrows can bring you a life of luxury. I blinked at it, confused, a little amused. Me, what is this? Angie, IDK, found on Reddit, great results. Click it. I frowned. Since when did Angie use punctuation? That weird little detail should have been my first red flag, but I shrugged it off. Curiosity wasn't my strong suit. I tapped the link. A black screen filled my phone, a lone spinning gray circle in the center. It loaded so slowly I groaned, propping my feet on the coffee table. My apartment was quiet and heavy in the late night dark. The faint smell of the Domino's pizza I devoured earlier still clinging to the air. Finally, the screen changed. It was a menu, like a cheap mobile game. Dance settings menu exit. A cold shiver crept up my spine. Something deep in me whispered, "Don't click dance." I should have listened, but I didn't. I tapped. One single command appeared in big white letters. Twirl. I laughed awkwardly, stood up, and spun once in my living room. Great job. Another command. Jumping jacks. I sighed but obeyed, hopping in place, already winded from my warehouse shifts. Then came the final message. Last one. Eros lumine acrodelsis. The words were strange, wrong somehow, like they didn't belong in my mouth. But I said them aloud anyway. The phone let out a piercing ping that rattled through the room. I jumped, dropping it onto the couch. When I picked it back up, the screen simply read, "Congrats, luxury." Then the app vanished. No history, no trace. I texted Angie. Me, this is stupid. Just made me do a bunch of exercise, lol. She didn't reply for hours. I crawled into bed, exhausted, and was half asleep when my phone finally dinged. Angie, I'm sorry. My stomach twisted. Me, sorry? For what? The message went green. She blocked me. When morning came, my phone vibrated with a bank notification. $10 million has been deposited into your account. I sat up so fast I almost fell out of bed. Oh fuck. Oh my fucking God. Throwing on clothes. I didn't even look in the mirror as I grabbed my car keys and sped to Angie's house. The street was eerily silent. Her porch felt wrong, the air thick like static. Angie! I banged on the door, heart hammering. No answer. Open up, Angie. The final pound made the door creak open. A smell rolled out, thick and putrid, like something long dead. I gagged, yanking my shirt over my nose as I stepped inside. The flashlight on my phone cut through the dark, and I saw blood, so much blood, painted up the walls, pooled on the floor, splattered across the ceiling until there wasn't a clean inch of white left. And Angie, she was strung up by her own intestines, her body twisted and mangled like a grotesque marionette. I vomited, collapsing to my knees. That's when I heard it, a low, guttural growl from deeper in the house. I froze. The open doorway beyond seemed to swallow my flashlight beam whole, black and bottomless. The growl got closer. I bolted, stumbled out the door, tripping down the steps, fumbling for my car keys. By the time I slammed the door shut behind me, my chest felt like claws were sinking into my lungs. I barely remember driving. I just remember dialing 911 with shaking hands, my voice cracking as I screamed into phone. The cops came. Questions were asked, but none of it mattered. Why me? Why any of this? I took a week off work. I didn't touch the money. Couldn't. The game. Angie's body. The smell. The words. I couldn't stop thinking about it. Then the light started flickering. At first, I thought it was just old wiring, but soon the air in the house grew heavy and wet, like breathing through syrup. My reflection in the mirror became wrong, sagging, pale, my eyes sunken deep like I hadn't slept in weeks. I hated looking at myself. Then one night, I woke up and everything was pitch black. The lights wouldn't turn on. It was so fucking hot. I grabbed my phone, the flashlight trembling in my hands as I scanned the room. The walls looked damp, like they were sweating. And then, exhale, a soft breath, just outside my bedroom door. I locked it instantly, heart racing, the shuffle of footsteps, and then my phone pinged. Unknown, you played the game. Unknown, you didn't follow the rules. Unknown, didn't spend the money. I stared at the screen, shaking. Me, who the fuck is this? The doorknob jiggled. I'd never read the rules. Crack. The door splintered as something pulled at it, impossibly strong. I backed up until I was pressed against the far wall, whispering over and over, fuck, fuck, fuck. It's been days now. I've survived on the stale snacks in my nightstand and water from the bathroom sink. The breathing outside the door hasn't stopped. It's getting louder, angrier, though it cracks and groans a little more each hour. I don't know how much longer it'll hold. I wondered how Angie was feeling in her last days. Did she ever think she would escape? Did I? I think I'm going to jump. I'm sitting outside the window, writing this. I won't let it have me, even if it means becoming a splat of flesh on the concrete 6 stories from my window. Story 5. My family are lying about how my cousin died. Here's how it happened. My sister Ally and I inherited a toy box from our grandmother when she passed away. One of the few things my parents considered worth salvaging from her possessions. The rest of them were sent away to Goodwill or to the junkyard, or were passed around any relatives that cared to claim them. The toy box nobody had wanted. And so it ended up with us. Ally and I hated it on sight, and avoided putting anything into it we valued, not least because things seemed to go missing from it on a regular basis. The chest was made of grimy varnished wood, a grinning bear painted in a 1940s cartoon style on every side. You could tell it was supposed to be cute, but the artist had done a bad job of it. The bear's eyes oddly humanoid and threatening, its smile full of overlarge teeth with a fat tongue protruding grossly through the middle. How that drawing had ever been deemed appropriate for children, I don't know, but then things like that passed in those days. Neither of our parents seemed to see anything wrong with it. Anyway, Grandma would wanted you to have it. Mom said in stern response to our complaints. Don't you think so? Ally and I looked at each other and shrugged. We'd never seen much of our grandmother while she was alive, only during the holidays. Even then she'd mostly sit in an armchair drinking whiskey and getting emotional about her brother, who'd allegedly run away when he was 10 or so and had never come home. We had no idea if Grandma even loved us, let alone if she'd care whether or not we hung on to an old toy box that had surely only ever brought her bad memories. But our mother, teary adamant, insisted that we keep it even after Ally admitted that it was giving her nightmares. She wasn't the only one. I took to throwing the blanket over the box at night, convinced that I could see the bear's eyes blinking in the dark, its hairy lips moving around words I could only ever decipher in dreams. The bear trap was mostly empty by that point. We'd gotten into the habit of hiding our favorite toys at the bottom of the wardrobe after noticing the vast majority of the things we stored in the malign box were lost soon after, or eaten as we believed. When the time came for Ally to move into her own room, we had a heated argument about which of us had to keep the bear trap. I argued that since I got the old bedroom, it was only fair that she took it off my hands, whereas Ally insisted that it may as well stay where it was, and that moving it could only be a bad idea. In the end, she got her way, triggering a feud between us that went on for a solid month. It only ended with the announcement that our cousin Harry was coming over for Christmas, forcing us to agree to a temporary truce in order to manage the crisis. Harry was just 2 years younger than us, but he still acted like a little kid, clingy and deliberately annoying in whatever way provoked the biggest reaction out of us. Whenever our aunt and uncle stayed over, we were expected to keep our cousin occupied. meaning out of the way of the adults, who were not exempt from Harry's reign of terror. "We've got to do something about him," said Ally. "If he starts repeating everything I say like the last time, I'm going to freak out. Like, seriously, I'll go insane." "I know," I said somberly. "Remember when he broke that chair and Dad went nuts at us like it was our fault?" Ally groaned. "Yeah, or that time he kept bouncing that tennis ball off of everything." I nodded. "He did it all night. I grabbed it and hid it somewhere, and he started yelling his ass off." Ally threw herself onto my bed and screamed into the pillow. "God, I can't stand him. So what do we do?" I asked. "If we don't come up with something before he gets here, we're screwed." The conversation was taking on the severity of a war room debate. "We still have a week before we have to see him," said Ally. "That's enough time, right?" "I don't know," I said. "I hope so." By the day Harry arrived, my sister and I had come to an agreement to keep him distracted with as many games as we could think of. Being that he had such a short attention span, nothing worked until Ally suggested hide and go seek, which brought out a rare competitive focus in him we'd never seen before and knew we likely never would again. Every time Ally or I ended up as it, we'd spent a long time pretending to look for Harry around the house, dragging out the search for as long as we could before finding him and starting another round. We made a huge show of frustration in our losses to keep Harry on the hook, concealing our laughter as he punched the air and hooped before charging off again, determined to beat us some more. It was during our fifth turn of the game that we realized we genuinely could not find him anywhere, having searched every room and every possible hiding spot there was. We'd grown up in that house, knew every part of it, as well as we knew each other. We knew, too, that Harry hadn't left the property. Both the front and back doors were locked, and there were no footprints to be seen outside in the snow. Panting like runners, Ally and I sat together at the top of the stairs, amazed at having been truly defeated. Then we looked at each other, and a live wire jolt of understanding sparked us both to our feet again. "The bear trap," I said. "It's the last place he could be." "Could he even fit in there?" Ally asked, trying to sound doubtful. Harry was slight for his age, and more than a head shorter than I'd been then, with the toy box being the size of a large coffee table. He could have curled up inside pretty comfortably, and could have breathed just fine if he propped the lid open a crack. I wonder with a twisting horror if he'd forgotten to do this and had suffocated to death while we'd been looking for him. But that didn't feel right somehow. I didn't know how to explain it to Ally, so I kept my mouth shut until we were both in my room, looking at the bear trap as though the animal painted on its many faces would rear up and maul us if we got too close. "You'd better open it," I said. Ally shoved her hands in her pockets and shook her head. "It's your room, so it's your box. You open it." We were both scared, talking fast, fiddling with our clothes, anything but doing what needed to be done. "What if he's dead?" I asked, and Ally flicked her eyes to me without moving her head, so I saw mostly the whites. "Don't," she muttered. "Just don't say that, okay?" I think even then we understood that neither of us would see Harry alive again. The way the jigsaw puzzles and Lego sets we'd cast at the bottom of the chest had never been recovered. We knew that the box was more than a box, knew that we'd been keeping something dangerous in the house, without comprehending what exactly it was. "If he is dead," said Ally, "what are we going to do?" "Maybe he won't be," I said. "Not everything we put in there goes away, right? There's still some old junk inside." Ally chewed anxiously at the tail of her braid. "Yeah," she said, "but most of it goes away." Using the tip of one sneaker, I eased open the lid of the bear trap and kicked it until it fell open against the wall. Apart from a few sad-looking action figures and dusty boxes, there was nothing inside except for 2 dirty footprints where Harry must have been curled up at the bottom. He'd been there, all right, and now he was gone from it in a way that meant the bear trap had swallowed him. Ally turned me another wide-eyed, sideways glance. "We can't tell anyone about this," she whispered. "They'll say we did it to him." In a kind of cold, adult amazement, I stared back at her. "Allison," I said slowly, "you don't get it. Mom and Dad don't see the bear trap like we do. Even if we did tell anybody about it, they'd just think we were lying. They'll never know. We were both right, in our way. When we told our family we'd lost Harry, we were immediately held responsible. Why hadn't we watched him more closely? Hadn't we heard him going outside? Why had we left it so long to tell them he'd gone, when some stranger was probably driving away with Harry in the trunk that very moment? The cops asked similar questions when they inevitably came by. Ally and I stuck to the same story, which aside from the one significant omission was the truth. We were both grounded for months, which I grimly tolerated, and Ally took to like a guilty prisoner, having accepted her share of the blame. I resented that Mom had left us with the bear trap, that there was no way to make the adults understand what had really happened that day. It made me bitter and quiet, a teenager before my time. Mostly I was afraid. However, I kept imagining that one day I'd be made to climb into the box, that it would close on me, bite me in half. Whenever I sat up at night, I thought I saw the lid open and shut under the sheet I'd thrown over it, mocking me. I projected some kind of evil onto the bear trap for so long that it felt alive to me, in some way, and I hated it so intensely that my anger was all that held me up against my fear. I never expected to learn what happened to my cousin, supposing he'd simply dropped out of existence, like a word scratched off a page. Wherever things went when they were lost under beds or down cracks in the sidewalk was where he was. Or so I thought until, at the end of February, 2 men in suits and overcoats turned up at our front door. What they said to my parents to let them in and talk to them I'll never know. As far as they're concerned, those men never came by. Sticking resolutely to the story, they were given to repeat until it became the only truth there was. After they'd spoken to the family, one of the strangers came upstairs to interview Ally and me one after the other. He talked to me last, knocking on my bedroom door and letting himself in before I even had the chance to answer. "Hi, Reese," he said. "You know why I'm here, don't you?" I did, having gotten the sense of it watching his expensive car pull up in front of the house. "You want to talk about Harry," I said reluctantly, "but I know you're not a cop. They came over already." The man certainly didn't look like a police officer, and I wouldn't have believed him if he claimed to be. He could only have been 20 at the most, with a blonde surfer boy haircut and a piercing in his left eyebrow. I noticed that he smelled of mint gum and a popular brand of cologne, obnoxiously strong, and that there was something not right about his eyes. Maybe it's how blue they were, like contacts on a movie set, or how hard he stared when he was talking. If he blinked even once, I didn't notice. I tried not to look at him, my eyes on the tips of his black shoes, which were obviously new. "You're right, Reese," the man said. "I'm not a cop. Not exactly. My name is Creed Jansen and my colleague Milo, and I clear up situations like yours. Tie loose ends, things like that. Certain situations require certain people. Does that make sense to you?" "I guess so," I said. "You're government agents or something." Creed grinned. His teeth were very straight, most likely veneers. "Agents," he repeated. "Something like that." Any other kid might have been scared or excited by the admission. As it was, I felt nothing but the brutal stamp of dread. "You found Harry somewhere," I said, "and you know about the bear trap." Creed nodded. "You mean the toy box Allison filled us in?" There was no disbelief or sense of humoring a child's fantasy in his tone, as I'd anticipated. I looked at him directly, then, astonished to realize that he had received the story without any surprise whatsoever. "I should tell you right now that we found your cousin's body," said Creed. "We were tipped off about a cadaver that had been discovered in a forested area just over the Canadian border. He'd been dead when he arrived there, curled up on his side in the snow, and there were no signs of any living person having been in the area to have dumped or posed a body in that position. It was like he dropped out of the sky. Only we both know that's not what happened." I glanced into the corner of the room where the bear trap lay under its shroud. "The box," I whispered. "It sent him there." "I'm afraid it did," said Creed. "It wasn't the first time it did something like that, either." His voice was that of a salesman, lively but professional. "There was another body within a 3-mile radius of your cousin's," he continued. "It had been there, well, a long time. As I understand it, your grandmother had a brother that ran away?" Here Creed mimicked air quotes with one hand. "Yeah," I said shakily. "Roger. He was 11, nearly 12, I think. He used to run away a lot, but one time he never came back. Grandma was always talking about it. I remember she got drunk one Thanksgiving, and told us she knew that he was dead. I sat down on the edge of my mattress, feeling weightless and vaguely ill. For whatever reason, Roger must have gotten into that box, said Creed. And when he got out, he was somewhere very far away. You see, Roger survived the journey. Shock killed Harry, or some other condition of that kind of travel we don't fully understand. Roger was a little more tough. He tried to get by out there in the forest, lived on what he could, walked some distance hoping to find his way out. But the cold got to him. Where we found the bodies, there were toys everywhere covered in snow, some of them old, some of them new, guessing they were yours. I said that they were. Well, said Creed, that helps us out a lot. That's confirmation both bodies arrived in the area in the same way, which we already knew. But this is what I'm paid to do, Reese. Tie up all those loose ends into a neat little bow. What is the box? I asked, why do things disappear out of it? Does it do it on purpose? Creed smiled. No more than a door opens or a hallway leads somewhere else. You see, the box is just a box, or it was at one time. That changed. See, from time to time openings appear in space, or even objects that are shortcuts to other places. Sometimes they just appear naturally all by themselves. Like wormholes, I said, thinking of the sci-fi shows my dad watched endlessly in the living room on gray afternoons. You get it, said Creed. A lot like that. But sometimes these shortcuts aren't all that stable, which makes them dangerous, or people stumble into them without knowing what they are, or they'll end up, and they're the ones Milo and I have to investigate. That kind don't just appear on their own. There's generally a reason. Creed paused, waiting for me to ask a leading question. When I only looked dully at him, he said, the toy box, or the bear trap, as you guys call it, used to belong to your grandmother and your great-uncle Roger. And, like I said before, when it arrived at the house, it really was just a box. But after a while, it turned into something else. See, these shortcuts sometimes occur when in the presence of a young person with unused and likely undiscovered psychic abilities. Milo and I looked into your family history. Seems that Roger was having problems fitting in with his peers. Fought a lot with his parents. Felt like they just didn't get him, and he wasn't wrong. There was a reason he wasn't like everybody else, but there was no way for him to understand that or get the help he needed. Taking the chewing gum from his mouth, Creed looked around hopefully for a trash can, resigning himself to putting the wad into a twist of paper in his pocket before unwrapping another. All the ability Roger wasn't using and all the discomfort just built right up, he said. Got stronger and stronger until it started creating a shortcut. Usually they form in places that are already doorways or openings of some sort. A lidded box is as good as any. Roger had no idea what he was making in there, not consciously, anyway, but his subconscious. The part of him that was lonely and angry with everybody, that knew. I looked down at the floorboards, their little lines wiggling in my vision like drunken worms. That's why the box leads to the wilderness, I said, because Roger wanted to run somewhere far away. Bang on the money, said Creed, extending a hand to ruffle my hair until I cringed away. Poor guy just got unlucky. One day, he hid in that box, maybe after some fight with his parents or playing a game like Harry, and then he was gone. The shortcut wasn't strong enough for him to get back through, and it stayed just as unstable all these years later. I bet you noticed not everything you put in the box got lost, right? Right, I echoed. The shortcut was weak. Maybe one day it might have broken down and gone away altogether, if the bear trap hadn't ended up with you and Allison. I gazed at Creed again, and as his eyes met mine, I shuddered, disturbed by the familiarity of the gesture. You knew that there was something off of that box right away, didn't you? Asked Creed gently. And you know other things that maybe don't make sense. Both you and your sister feel that same way. You're twins, aren't you? Yeah, I said. Well, there you go. It's more likely in twins, inheriting abilities like the ones Roger had, and you both got the luck of the draw. As you got older, and those powers got a little stronger, you stabilized a shortcut. Probably wouldn't have been able to if there weren't two of you. It's been a long time. After all, it should have broken down by now. But two kids with the same psychic focus, the same grievance. Creed trailed off, leaving me horrified by the implication of his words. We didn't want Harry to disappear. I said, not like that. We didn't mean to kill him. Did you tell him to stay away? Asked Creed innocently. I mean, no, but we didn't know. We didn't know. I swallowed, flushed with panic. We didn't, okay? Of course not, said Creed, patting my shoulder. Milo and me, we know that. We get it. You're kids. Mistakes like this happen all the time. That's why we're here. We're going to take the box with us and put it somewhere out of the way. Milo's downstairs figuring out the legal side of things. We need to agree on a more straightforward version of events. Something the police can sign off on. I watched Creed heft the box under one arm, his slim figure unhindered by its weight. You mean we've got to lie about what happened? I said, more like approach things from a more grounded angle. But sure, let's go with that. You've been doing just fine on that front even before we got here. Yeah, I admitted, but it's wrong to lie, right? I expected Creed to correct me with a more palatable phrase. Instead, he said, it's how we keep stuff like this quiet, Reese, which is how we keep people safe. What if something else happens? I asked, another accident. Now that you know about your abilities, you should be all right, like being aware of your own strength. So keep aware. Maybe you'll see me again, maybe you won't. Let's hope you won't. Creed readjusted the box in his arms, rolling one shoulder slightly. Well, he said, I'd better get going. There's a lot more work out there needing to be done. Bye, Reese. I opened the bedroom door for him and hung back as he carried the bear trap downstairs and out of the house, the other, dark-haired stranger following close behind. Ally slunk out her own room to stand beside me at a nearby window as we watched them load the box into the car they'd arrived in. Are you okay? I asked once they were gone. Ally's eyes were red-rimmed, the result of private crying. Not really, she said. Me neither. I sat on the windowsill, surprised that the grief I wanted to feel did not come. All that was over months ago. What did the other guy do? I asked, the one who stayed downstairs with Mom and Dad. He made them sign some stuff, said Ally. I listened. They're not allowed to talk about what happened. They have to tell people some creepy man took Harry away. But there wasn't a man. It was us. Are we bad people now, Reese? Ally looked at me with huge, watery eyes, and I felt sorry for her, as though the two of us, she was the only child in the room. No, Ally, I told her, we're not bad people. But I didn't believe it, said it only to comfort her, or unsuccessfully convince myself that it was so. I couldn't tell my sister how afraid I was of certain people coming by again, or how I wasn't sure that an awareness of what we were capable of was enough to keep us from doing something wrong again. There were so many nights after that I felt the box feeling of the uncanny and wondered if I was opening other shortcuts somewhere, or building something new and unspeakable that even together my sister and I could not control. I wish we'd never learned what had happened to Harry, that I didn't know what we could do or what we'd done. Story 6. I've been pulling diamonds out of my skin to pay for my sister's care. My name is Daniel. I haven't left my flat in months. My sister, Abby, is bedridden in the next room. She's 23, disabled from an overdose at a party, and I do everything for her. I feed her, I clean her, I keep her alive. She relies on me for everything. The world out there doesn't care about people like us. Insurance won't cover the experimental treatment that could save her. I thought I was out of options. Then something fell out of the sky. It was around midnight. I was video calling a friend who also lived in Egglemore and owned a local pawn shop. He got some exciting memorabilia in for my favorite show and was showing it off on camera. He knew I couldn't afford it, but was always excited to see it nevertheless. Just before we hung up, the electrics glitched in my living room and the laptop went dead. Then I heard the glass explode. A black rock had shattered through my kitchen window. It hissed and steamed, reeking of ammonia. I coughed so hard I passed out for a moment. When I woke up, the rock was just sitting there, cold, dead. But when I touched it, it felt wrong, too heavy, too sharp in places. I shoved it outside. That night, I felt a lump on my forehead. By morning it had hardened, an inflamed red spot with a juicy head. I squeezed it hard, and a jagged crystal popped out of my skin. It hurt like hell, blood everywhere. But I went my friend to have it appraised. It was a diamond. I sold it for 3,000 pounds, enough to keep the lights on and pay a bit toward Abby's medical bills. For the first time in years, I felt hope, but the lump came back. Then another one. They spread like acne, tiny hard knots under my skin. I kept digging them out. Some were as small as beads, some as big as marbles. The pain was unbearable, but I told myself it was worth it. Every agonizing hole in my face bought Abby another day. 3 weeks later, my face is completely unrecognizable. The crystals aren't just under my skin anymore. I have a giant one puncturing through my cheek, jagged like an icicle, dragging my head down from its weight. I can barely see out of one eye. Everything is stained a dark crimson. Light filtered through the crystalline structure. I can't chew anything, and trying to eat soft food is just as futile. It all slips through my cheek. I'm running out of time, but I've almost hit 90,000 pounds from selling them. Abby's treatment cost 100,000 pounds. One more big crystal might be enough. The lump in my temple is as big as a fist now. I call my friend round. He reckons it will be worth at least enough to cover the rest of the treatment. He can't hide his disgust, but he's promised to stay. I can't pull this one out myself. It's growing inwards as well as out, jutting up against my brain. I'm already losing the feeling in my body. My friend's got a scalpel. He keeps asking if I'm sure. I am. If anyone finds this post, take it as a warning. Don't touch the rocks that fall from the sky. It's not worth it. Please make sure Abby gets her treatment. Story 7. The Nosleep. The worn Nike duffel bag lay open on my bed, waiting to swallow my camping gear. My eyes drifted to the wall of photos from my high school experience. There was Charlie, my best friend since kindergarten, grinning like a maniac, his arms slung around my shoulder, joint poised in his lips. Another shot showed June and I, her smile radiant. A guitar clutched in my hands, my eyes locked on her as she sang along. My longtime crush, even when she was in a relationship. Then there was Jason, in his basketball jersey, usually with some girl of the week clinging to him. We'd been through so much together, from awkward middle school romances to sneaking out to smoke behind the bleachers in high school. Now, graduation caps thrown behind us, and this camping trip to Manistee National Forest felt like the last hurrah of us before we all scattered across the country. A buzz from my phone. Charlie. Yo, almost there home, skillet. I quickly shoved the last few items into my bag before zipping it up and heading downstairs. Bye, Grandma, Grandpa. I called out, walking over to give my grandpa a hug. Grandpa was already by Grandma's bedside, gently adjusting her blanket, untangling her dialysis machine. She'd been bedridden for months, and he was her constant, quiet guardian. Love you, Nana, I said, kissing her forehead. I'll be back after the weekend. Oh, I love you too, son, she replied, her voice a bit labored, as she reached an arm over me to hug me. Don't have too much fun now. She and Grandpa had been my everything, raising me since my mom passed away. My dad was never really in the picture, gone long before I was born. Just as I reached the porch, a cacophony of honking erupted from the street. The beat-up Dodge van, Charlie's pride and joy, pulled up to the curb. Charlie's had popped out the window. Hope you're ready to trip absolute donkey dick this weekend, Charlie said, holding up a baggie of brownie. Ashley and June giggled from the back. I grabbed my bag and jogged out, a nervous excitement fluttering in my chest. This was it. The drive into Manistee National Forest was a blur of green. We passed one other campsite, a small tent tucked away with a few campers by the fire. They raised their beers as we passed by. Before reaching our spot at the end of the drive-in, it was pretty secluded, surrounded by towering white pines, the air thick with the scent of the needles damp with the earth. We quickly set up our camp. the 2 tents and fire pit, fueled by the energy from a promise of a wild night. And wild it was. This was our graduation celebration. After all, the music blared from the speaker, a mix of grunge and classic rock. We passed joints around, the sweet, earthy smoke mingling with the campfire smell. Charlie, true to his eccentric nature, pulled out the baggie of mushroom brownies. For a real trip, boys and girls. Keep arms and legs in and buckle your seatbelts. It's going to be a bumpy ride, he announced, holding them out, his eyes gleaming. We all took a few, the laughter growing louder. The world began to warp. Colors intensified. Sounds became echoes. I remember looking up at the canopy of trees, seeing the stars spin like glitter. Then, a pair of yellow eyes in the darkness, a black owl, perched on a branch, watching us with an unnerving stillness. Later, I saw him again, or thought I did, this time on the shoulder of a figure, tall and gaunt, moving silently through the trees, a native man. I remember trying to focus, to make sense of it, but the mushrooms had me in their grip. I just chalked it up to the trip, continued laughing with my friends. The next morning was a dull ache. Waking up to Charlie holding me in a little spoon, Jason's feet pressed against my cheek. My head throbbed. My mouth felt like sandpaper, but the first joint of the day was already lit courtesy of June, easing the edges of the hangover. I stumbled away from the campfire, needing to pee, headed deeper into the woods. That's when I saw him again. The native man, just as I remembered, well, without the owl anyways, walking slowly, his back to me. My heart hammered. This wasn't a trip. I called out, but he didn't respond, just kept moving. I followed, a strange compulsion pulling me forward. He seemed to glide through the undergrowth, always just out of reach. I lost sight of him around a tree. I waited for a moment, before turning to give up and go back, when there he was, suddenly, right behind me, his eyes piercing, ancient. "You must leave," he said, his voice a low rumble, like stone shifting. "Leave this place. It's cursed land of Baguk, and you are trespassing. Were you staking us?" I blurted out before I could stop it. "You and your owl last night, watching me." His eyes widened, a flicker of genuine shock crossing his stoic face. "The owl? You saw the mutt?" He stepped closer, his voice dropping to a harsh whisper. "Then you know. The curse is upon you. Death is coming." "Thomas, what are you doing?" Jason's yell cut through the heavy air. I looked over my shoulder, startled. By the time I turned back, the native man was gone, vanished as if he'd never been there. The woods were silent once more, except for the distant chirping of birds and cicadas. Back at camp, the others were already cracking open beers, trying to shake off the lingering effects of the night. I tried to tell them about the native man, the owl, the warning, but they just laughed it off. "Still tripping, dude." Charlie said, "Passing me a beer." I sighed, cracking it open and sitting down on the folding chair. We settled into talking about the future. June, her eyes bright, spoke of moving to L.A., of singing on big stages. Charlie, ever the instigator, grabbed my guitar. "Come on, Thomas. Play something for June." I hesitated, but June's expectant smile was enough. I strummed a few chords, tuning the guitar I knew already was, before playing a tune of Fast Car by Tracy Chapman. I loved it when June sang it, something her blush told me she already knew. She began to sing, her voice clear and beautiful, echoing through the trees. It was a perfect moment, fragile and fleeting. I stared at her for a moment when the song was over, watching her smile and laugh as she thanked her friends applauding. Then Jason interrupted. "Hey, check this out." He pointed to the van. The front tire was completely flat, parked directly on a broken glass bottle. "No spare either," he grumbled, kicking the tire. We planned on staying another night anyway, so it wasn't a disaster, but it meant calling AAA tomorrow. Jason was already fuming about the cost. "It's okay, baby. We can ask the other campers." They had a truck, but the spare might fit, Ashley added, trying to lighten the mood. "Yeah, let's go interrupt their time to bring them into our problems," Jason interjected. June, ever observant, pointed to the oldest, gnarliest tree near our camp. "Whoa, look at this," she said, tracing something carved into its bark. It says, Powguck, it looks freaky. A chill ran down my spine. The name felt wrong, heavy. Just then, a blood-curdling scream tore through the forest, coming from up the drive, from the other campsite. Charlie's face went pale. I'll stay here with the woman, he stammered, clearly terrified. I chuckled, always so extra, I thought before exchanging a look with Jason. Let's go, he said, grabbing a flashlight. I nodded, a familiar unease settling over me. There was always a strange distance between us, and I wondered if he felt it too. Hey, you good, Tommy? He asked, confirming my suspicion. Yeah, I'm good. Just never alone with you, I guess. I admitted. What, you scared of me or something? He teased. No. You just seem to have it all figured out. I replied, choosing my words carefully. He scoffed. I'm far from that. I always thought you did. You ace school, play amazing guitar. June won't shut up about you. He grinned as my face flushed at the mention of her name. No, for real. Even when we were together, I could tell she liked you. Why haven't you asked her out yet? But she was your girlfriend before. I explained. I didn't want to seem like a jerk for asking her out after. You know, Thomas, he said, his voice low. You're a good dude. Always have been. It was a rare moment of vulnerability from the jock, and it made the horror we were walking towards even more unsettling. We stumbled upon the other campsite with dreadful swiftness, the flickering firelight casting an eerie glow on a scene of carnage. 2 men and a woman lay sprawled amidst their overturned gear, their bodies grotesquely gutted, near their tent. The 2 men lay lifeless, one with his throat slit ear to ear and his abdomen violently splayed open, exposing a tangle of viscera. Beside him, the other man was a mangled mess, his arms ripped clean from their sockets, leaving behind ragged, bloody stumps. The woman's body was equally disturbing. Her severed hand, frozen in a death grip, was on the handle of the truck, a testament to her effort to escape. Her torso lay on the ground, her jaw completely missing, a gaping, bloody void where her mouth should have been. Her eyes, or what remained of them, were gouged out, leaving only raw, empty sockets. The sheer, brutal force evident in the dismemberment and mutilation was horrifying, far beyond anything a human could inflict. My stomach lurched, threatening to betray me. Jesus fuck! We have to call somebody. We need to get them help. Jason whispered, his voice hoarse. Help? I questioned. I think they're way beyond helping Jason. We pulled out our phones, but there was nothing. Dead zones. Jason remembered seeing a map at the entrance. We can take the golf cart back to the group, then head to the ranger station. I saw it on the map up the drive. I agreed, and we raced back to camp, the smell of blood still in my nostrils, wind hitting our faces through the open cage of the cart. We relayed the information, our voices hushed, urgent. Animal attack? Ashley whispered, her eyes wide. Lunatic. Charlie offered, shaking his head. We didn't want to find out. We piled into the golf cart, the engine sputtering to life, and sped toward the map at the drive-in. From there, we found a path to the ranger station. It was a small, dilapidated cabin. Pulling up into the lawn, we saw it look completely empty. As we pulled up, the sky opened, a sudden, violent storm lashing rain against the windows. We had no choice but to take shelter. A phone, a radio, anything to call for help? Jason urged, and we fanned out, desperate for a way to reach someone. Charlie snatched up the radio, his voice tight with panic. Yo, hello? Man, you gotta send someone. People are dying and shit. Man, it's scary up in this bitch. Only static answered. You. Hell, Lou, he screamed, his voice cracking. Guys, look. Ashley's voice was a strained whisper. She pointed out the window at the antenna tower. Its dish lay on the ground, the tower itself bent at an almost 90-degree angle. I don't think we're getting any messages out, June added, her voice flat with resignation. I pointed to the map on the wall. There's another DNR station 10 miles out. If we can make it there, there are bound to be people. They quickly grabbed the map, their gazes fixed on the front doors. As the doors swung open, a hulking skeletal figure, its very essence vibrating with unnatural speed, stood waiting. It brandished a silver knife. Ashley screamed as a creature slashed its arm, its limbs crackling with an unsettling sound. She stumbled back, clutching her stomach as it carved a gash across her abdomen, falling to the ground. Charlie spun to run, but with impeccable speed. The creature snatched a bough from its back and drew the empty string. Charlie collapsed, clutching his leg, an arrow-sized hole appearing just above his knee. The creature drew the phantom arrow again, aiming it at me. I froze, paralyzed by terror, as Jason's voice boomed. "Hey, boner!" The creature turned just as Jason fired a flare directly into its shoulder. It recoiled, releasing an invisible bowstring, and something heavy smashed against the wall behind my head. A clock, now shattered. With a guttural snarl, the creature disappeared into the storm. Through the rain-streaked window, I saw it again, the owl, perched on a branch, its eyes glowing. The mutt, a surge of primal fear, mixed with rage, coursed through me. I grabbed the nearest object, a heavy, dusty book, and hurled it at the bird. It shrieked, a sound like tearing fabric, and flew away into the storm. We needed help desperately. We rummaged through the ranger station, our hands trembling. We found some tannerite for stumps, another flare for the flare gun, and a hunting rifle. I pocketed the tannerite, grabbed the flare gun from Jason as he took the rifle. "We're going for help," he said, his voice grim. "There's another ranger station, 10 miles away. We'll take the cart." "Out to that thing?" June asked, her eyes wide with concern as she looked at me. "We'll be okay, June," Jason said, holding up the rifle. "Just look after Ashley for me, please." He glanced at Ashley, who was wincing on the couch, clutching her belly. "What about me?" Charlie asked, his voice barely a whisper. "Yes, you too, Charlie," Jason added, a note of finality in his tone. We left Ashley and Charlie huddled together, June clinging to them, and piled into the golf cart. Jason slammed the accelerator, and we lurched forward, plunging into the raging storm. The 2-track trail, already slick with mud, quickly became a marsh. The golf cart, built for leisurely strolls, not a desperate escape, groaned and shuddered before its wheels spun uselessly. "Damn it!" Jason grunted, trying to rock it free. We jumped out, pushing against the back, our feet sinking into the muck. It was useless. The cart was stuck fast. "Only 2 more miles," Jason gasped, his face pale in the faint glow of the headlights, his breath plumbing in the frigid air. We started walking, the wind whipping at our clothes. Jason was limping heavily, his arms slung over my shoulder, leaning on me for support. The storm howled around us, a primal scream that seemed to swallow all other sounds. Trees swayed like drunken giants, their branches clawing at the sky. Every shifting shadow held a perceived threat, every creak and groan of the forest sounding like approaching footsteps. Just when I thought my legs would give out, a faint light appeared through the driving rain. The second ranger station, a small cabin nestled amongst the trees, stood as a beacon in the oppressive darkness. We stumbled towards it, half collapsing against the door. The door opened, revealing a burly man with a kind, weathered face. He took one look at our soaked, terrified expressions and the blood staining Jason's sleeve, and his demeanor shifted instantly. "What in God's name happened to you two?" the ranger exclaimed, his eyes scanning us with concern. We need help," I stammered, my voice hoarse. There's something out there." "Our friends are back at our campsite," Jason added, his voice strained. "One of them hurt badly." The ranger didn't hesitate. "Get in. I'll take you back. Just tell me where." He grabbed his keys from a hook, his gaze firm and reassuring. "We'll get M." "Thought my night was over," the ranger chuckled, his breath pluming in the cold air as he started the truck. It was far from over. The world exploded. A blinding flash of lightning ripped across the sky, followed by a deafening roar of thunder. For a split second, I could have sworn I saw the creature running alongside us in the tree line, a blur of skeletal fury. "Oh, shit!" the ranger yelled, his voice tight with alarm. The truck spun wildly on the slick trail, headlights sweeping across the thrashing trees, before we slammed into something with a sickening crunch. My head snapped forward, slamming against the dashboard. Disoriented, the world tilted and spun. I shook my head, trying to clear the fog. Jason groaned from the passenger seat. His leg twisted at an unnatural angle. Broken. I lunged to help him, but the ranger was nowhere to be seen. Then came his screams. They ripped through the storm, echoing from all sides of the woods, agonizing and raw. A sickening thud followed, and then, in the stark beam of the headlights, his head rolled into view. His eyes were gouged out, and a grotesque, stretched smile was carved into his cheeks. Run! I screamed, grabbing Jason and hauling him to his feet. We stumbled, half ran, half crawled, Jason's dead weight, a terrible anchor, back toward the first ranger station. We burst to the front door of the ranger station, adrenaline coursing through us, only to be met with another wave of horror. Ashley lay slumped against the far wall, unconscious, a fresh, deep gash marring her arm. Her breath was shallow, almost imperceptible. Charlie was in even worse shape. He was clearly nodding out, his eyes glazed and unfocused, his breathing distressingly shallow. But the most chilling discovery was yet to come. June! I screamed, my voice cracking, the name tearing from my throat. She was gone. Panic, cold and sharp, seized me. My eyes darted frantically around the room, searching, praying, and then I saw it. A sickening smear of blood on the worn wooden floorboards, leading directly to the back door. A clear drag trail followed, disappearing into the impenetrable darkness of the woods beyond. Without a second thought, driven by a primal urge to protect, I snatched up the rifle Jason had dropped earlier. Its cold metal felt heavy and strangely comforting in my trembling hands. "Stay here," I muttered, the words barely audible, though I knew it was a futile request. They were barely capable of staying conscious, let alone defending themselves. My gaze fixed on the grim trail, I pushed open the back door and plunged into the swirling, chaotic darkness of the storm. The crimson trail, stark against the damp earth, led me deeper into the churning chaos of the storm. The wind howled, and rain lashed down, but I barely registered it. My focus was solely on the deepening smears of blood, which, to my growing dread, veered sharply off the main trail, leading to a cluster of ancient, gnarled trees. There, half hidden by a cascade of thick, dripping vines, lay the gaping maw of a hidden cavern. Its entrance was a jagged, dark void, exhaling the damp, earthy scent of ancient stone and something else, something foul. I pulled the flashlight from my pocket, my fingers fumbling with the cold metal. Its narrow beam cut a weak swath of the oppressive, absolute darkness that swallowed the cavern's interior. Each droplet of water falling from the stalactites seemed to amplify the crushing silence. "June!" I whispered, the name catching in my throat, my voice trembling despite my best efforts to control it. The sound felt swallowed by the vast emptiness, a fragile plea against the encroaching terror. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat in the quiet. I swept the beam across the cavern floor, past glistening, jagged rocks and stagnant puddles. And then, in a small alcove carved into the rock face, I saw her. June. She was huddled in a tight ball, shivering uncontrollably, her face pale and streaked with dirt and tears. But she was alive. "Thomas!" she cried, her voice a raw, choked sob of pure relief. Her eyes, wide and luminous in the flashlight's glow, found mine, and for a fleeting moment, all the horror outside seemed to vanish. I rushed to her, pulling her to her feet. Her body felt frail and cold, trembling violently as I helped her steady herself. But just as her feet found solid ground, a profound shift in the air, a chilling drop in temperature, made the hairs on my neck stand on end. From the deepest shadows of the cavern, a form began to coalesce, a presence so inherently wrong it stole the breath from my lungs. The beast, the Paguk, its eyes, two pinpricks of malevolent, glowing red, ignited in the darkness, fixed on us with an unwavering, predatory intent. The air crackled with a palpable, ancient evil. There was no escape. My hands, slick with sweat and shaking violently, brought the rifle up. The Paguk loomed, a horrifying silhouette against the faint light from the cavern entrance, its malevolent eyes burning. I squeezed the trigger. Once, the shot cracked, a deafening report in the enclosed space, echoing off the damp stone walls. The creature barely flinched, the bullet seemingly absorbed by its unnatural form. A fresh wave of despair washed over me. But I didn't stop. Twice. Another shot. Still it stood, a dark, terrifying monolith of pure malice. No visible wound, no sign of pain. It was like shooting at a shadow. A third, desperate squeeze of the trigger. Click. The sickening sound of a jammed rifle. My blood ran cold. The Paguk lunged, an impossible blur of speed. I barely had time to react, throwing myself backward, but its razor-sharp claws raked across my outstretched arm, then tore through my shirt, carving a searing path across my chest. Pain flared hot and immediate, blossoming into 1,000 tiny agonies. We were locked in a desperate, brutal dance in the suffocating darkness. The creature was a whirlwind of claws and teeth, a phantom of destruction. Every swing, every parry, every desperate dodge was met with another agonizing tear. I was being shredded, cuts appearing everywhere, but I kept moving, a desperate, singular focus driving me. Keep it away from June. I snarled, pushed, shoved, anything to maintain a sliver of distance between the beast and her. Then a flash of movement. From the corner of my eye, I saw June, with surprising, almost impossible strength born of sheer terror and desperation. She had torn a jagged stalactite from the cave ceiling. It was heavy, razor-edged, and glistened menacingly in the dim light. With a raw, desperate cry that ripped from her throat, she plunged it, with all her might, into the beast's side. The Paguk shrieked. It wasn't a roar, but a sound of pure, unadulterated agony, an ear-splitting wail that vibrated through the very rock of the cavern. It recoiled violently, its glowing eyes wide with what seemed to be shock and pain. For the first time, it faltered. Run! I screamed. The single word ripped from my raw throat as I seized June's hand. Her fingers were cold and trembling, but she squeezed back, a silent testament to her terror and resolve. We stumbled, half crawling, half dragging ourselves toward the glimmer of the cavern entrance, the Paguk's guttural roars echoing behind us, a primal sound of fury and pain. Every ragged breath I took felt like broken glass in my lungs. Every muscle screamed in protest. But the image of that monstrous face propelled me forward. We burst out of the stifling, oppressive air of the cavern, and into the still howling, storm-ravaged night. The rain lashed down, instantly chilling us to the bone, but the fresh air was a welcome shock after the stagnant dread of the cave. As my eyes frankly scanned our surroundings, a desperate thought, a fragile thread of hope, sparked in my mind. The tannerite. My hand plunged into my pocket, fumbling blindly for the small, explosive canisters. My fingers, numb and clumsy, struggled with the fuse. I pulled it free, a small cylindrical shape, and with a surge of adrenaline-fueled urgency, I knelt and placed the tannerite just inside the cavern entrance, where the Paguk was likely to emerge. Get back! I bellowed to June, my voice barely audible above the storm shriek. I yanked the flare gun from my belt, the smooth plastic cold against my palm. My aim was steady, a desperate focus narrowing my world to just a gun, the fuse, and the raging storm. I squeezed the trigger. The flare shot from the barrel, a brilliant red streak against the dark, churning air. It arced perfectly, a fiery arrow piercing the tempest, and plunged into the cavern, directly onto the tannerite. Then came the explosion. A blinding flash of white light erupted from the cavern's mouth, momentarily searing itself into my retinas. It was followed by a thunderous roar, a concussive wave that slammed into us, shaking the very ground beneath our feet. The earth trembled, a deep, resonant rumble that vibrated through my bones. Tons of rock and earth rained down, a cascade of debris that hammered against the forest floor. Dust and pulverized stone billowed out, forming a choking cloud that momentarily obscured everything. When the echoes finally faded and the dust began to settle, the cavern entrance was gone, sealed, buried. The monster, hopefully, along with it. We ran, not a slow jog, but a desperate, lung-searing sprint. Adrenaline, the last vestiges of it, pumped through our veins, a burning fuel that pushed us onward. Every shadow still seemed to hold the grotesque face of the Paguk. Every snap twigged the sound of its pursuit. June stumbled beside me. but I held her hand tight, pulling her forward. Our ragged breaths plumed in the cold, rain-soaked air, mingling with the last lingering echoes of the explosion. Then, through the blurring rain and swaying trees, we saw them. A kaleidoscope of flashing blue and red lights pulsed through the dark, cutting through the storm like beacons. Police cars, dozens of them, it seemed, clustered around the first ranger station. They were already there. A wave of profound, overwhelming relief washed over me, so potent it almost buckled my knees. It was over. The next few hours were a disorienting blur. The sudden shift from primal terror to the organized chaos of emergency services was jarring. Uniformed officers, their faces grim and questioning, moved with purpose. Paramedics, their movements efficient and practiced, immediately took over, their voices calm amidst our trembling. They patched up my numerous cuts and gashes, cleaned June scrapes, and gave us blankets that felt impossibly warm. Then came the questions. So many questions. They wanted us to recount the impossible, to put words to the unspeakable horror we had just endured. How do you describe a creature that defies all known biology? How do you explain a fight in a cave against a being of pure malice? We tried, our voices hoarse and our minds reeling, repeating the same unbelievable story over and over. They listened, their expressions unreadable, scribbling notes on pads. Eventually, after what felt like an eternity, they let us leave. The storm had begun to subside, leaving behind a cold, clear night, but the quiet offered no comfort. The world felt irrevocably changed. On the long, quiet drive back, the world outside the car window felt strangely muted, almost dreamlike. The storm had finally broken, leaving behind a crisp, star-dusted night. But the quiet offered little comfort. My thoughts were a jumbled mess of terrifying images and the dull ache of the cuts across my body. Then, my phone buzzed incessantly in my pocket, a harsh, insistent vibration that cut through the silence. I pulled it out, my thumb brushing against the screen. 24 missed calls, all from Grandpa. My heart sank, a leaden weight in my chest. A cold dread, separate from the horrors of the night, began to spread. He only called that many times for one reason. I called him back, bracing myself for the worst. The phone rang 3 times before he picked up. His voice, we finally spoke, was tired, worn down by grief, but strangely calm. "Tommy," he said, his voice raspy. "It's Grandma." "I know, Grandpa." I saw the calls. I managed to choke out my own voice tight. He paused, a long, heavy silence stretching between us. She went peacefully, son, in her sleep. A strange, quiet grief settled over me, a heavy blanket that absorbed all other emotions. It was a profound, aching sadness, utterly unlike the visceral terror I had just faced. Coming after such a violent, chaotic night, this gentle, final passing felt surreal, a stark contrast to the brutal death we had witnessed. The world had torn itself apart, but in the quiet solitude of her bed, Grandma had simply slipped away. It was a raw, aching pain, made all the more poignant by the impossible events that had just unfolded. The aftermath of that night didn't just leave physical scars. It shattered the existing bonds between us. The group, once united by a shared purpose, fractured. Jason and Ashley couldn't withstand the immense pressure of the trauma they'd endured. Their relationship, once seemingly solid, crumbled under the weight of the unspeakable. The memories, the fear, the raw horror. It was simply too much, and they eventually went their separate ways. Charlie, still visibly shaken by the events, his eyes often distant and haunted, found solace in staying close to Jason. He ended up moving in with Jason, perhaps seeking a familiar anchor in a world that had suddenly become terrifyingly unpredictable. They shared a different kind of burden, a quiet understanding of what they witnessed, but it was one that pushed them inward, away from the wider world. But June and I, we found something else in the aftermath, something unexpected and profound, a shared understanding, a silent language forged in the crucible of terror. That night, fighting for our lives in the dark, had stripped away all pretense, revealing raw courage and an undeniable connection. It was a bond forged in terror, yes, but it was also steeped in a deep, unspoken trust. We clung to that connection, nurturing it, letting it grow. And just as she'd always dreamed, we left the ghosts of the forest behind and moved to Los Angeles. The city's vibrant energy, its relentless pursuit of dreams, felt like a stark contrast to the shadowy woods we'd escaped. She pursued her passion, her voice a beacon of strength and vulnerability. She sang, her melodies carrying the echoes of what we'd lived through, transforming them into something beautiful. And I, with my guitar, played alongside her, our music becoming an extension of our shared experience. It was born from the darkness, undeniably shaped by the fear and loss we'd known, but with every note, it soared into the light, a testament to resilience, to connection, and to healing power of shared purpose. Story 8. I think what I saw is still watching me. I'm writing because the last few days have been some of the most taxing I've ever experienced, and I need advice, or maybe not advice exactly. I just need help making sure I'm not losing my mind. It all started a few days ago. I won't lie, I was a bit under the influence, scrolling through some Reddit 50/50s. You know, the page that gives you two possible outcomes. One wholesome like puppies, the other usually something gross or NSFW. The twist is, you don't get to choose. It's random what you'll see when you click. It had been a long, stressful week at work, so I planned to unwind. I was drinking, about a beer per page. So by the time I hit page 13, I was definitely feeling it. That's when I came across a strange link. Puppy Bowl Greatest Plays, or the truth behind the uncanny valley. I chuckled and said, let's do it. Needless to say, it wasn't the Puppy Bowl. It linked to a plain web page with just a video player. No title, no description. Still in the spirit of the game, I clicked play. A cold, mechanical voice began narrating the 4-minute video. The uncanny valley is a theory introduced in 1970 by Masahiro Mori, a Japanese robotics expert. It describes a relationship between how human-like something appears and how we emotionally respond to it. A graph appeared on the screen as the voice continued. The most unsettling point is at the bottom of the valley, when something looks almost human, but something is off. A few AI-generated images and robotic faces flashed across the screen. They weren't grotesque, but something about them made me deeply uneasy. It's normal to feel discomfort or fear when you see images like these. But where does that fear come from? Suddenly, the page glitched and started to freak out, flashing distorted images of AI art. The voice came back, but it no longer sounded robotic. It sounded human, but wrong, just slightly off. The fear is primal. It comes from a deep, ancient part of your species' memory, an evolutionary response to something that looked human, but wasn't, something dangerous. What the fuck is this? I muttered, frantically clicking the close button, but the video wouldn't stop. We've always been here, the voice said, a random face in the crowd, and you never notice. But when you do, you look away. You keep walking. Panic rising, I held down the power button on my desktop. The voice cut off mid-sentence, but not before the screen flashed one final image, a video feed from my own webcam. It showed me, but the face on the screen was smiling. The smile was wide, too wide, with porcelain white teeth that were eerily straight. Shaking. I poured a glass of whiskey to steady my nerves and went to bed, but I was up and down all night. I wish I could tell you that the night ended there. A scary video and a panic attack, washed away by a pint of Jack. But I'd be lying if I said that was all. The next morning, I woke up nursing a brutal hangover on top of barely any sleep. My eyes burned. The bitter, sour taste of bile clung to the back of my throat, and my head pounded like a war drum. I knew I needed to eat, but I had zero motivation to cook. Eventually, I mustered the strength to get dressed and stumbled down to the local deli. I ordered my usual sausage, egg, and cheese with a hash brown tucked in, plus a black coffee. The cashier stared at me, probably because I looked like hell, but said nothing, just rang me up. A few minutes later, she called my name. I stepped up to grab my sandwich, and she was staring again. Uncomfortable, I tried to break the tension. Sorry, I'm kind of a mess. Had a long night. She blinked and suddenly seemed to snap out of it. Oh, I'm sorry, sir. I don't know why, but I could have sworn I served you earlier this morning. Weird. Anyway, have a great day. She brushed it off and returned to the register like nothing had happened. If I weren't so hungover, I might have asked her what she meant, but I felt like death, and I knew if I didn't get food in me fast, I'd redecorate the deli floor. So I made a beeline for my apartment, and that's when things started to get weird again. My computer monitor was off, but the webcam light was on. How long had it been like that? Had it ever turned off? Was it recording? I reached to unplug it, bumping the desk in the process. The screen flickered on. My stomach dropped. What the hell is going on? I yelled. The video was still playing. That same face, way too close to the camera, filled the screen. It began speaking again, completely unfazed. Your brain has two options. The first is to try to make sense of it. This often presents as deja vu, or a vague feeling that you've seen something before, even though you haven't. It paused. The silence dragged on, long enough to make my skin crawl. Then it continued. The second option is fear. Most will call it paranoia, or maybe agita, a vague discomfort at seeing a stranger you think you recognize. They're the smart ones. It smiled then. That awful, hideously perfect porcelain smile. Impossibly white teeth. Too many of them. My question for you is this. Next time you see one of us, how will you respond? Will you fear us or brush us off? Like that cute girl at the deli? Oh, well, we won't have to wait much longer to find out. It chuckled and the screen cut to black. Then it rebooted to a blue screen. All I could hear was a pounding of my heart, thudding like it was trying to escape my chest. Story 9. Mr. Tumbles cries to me at midnight. The house I lived in was a two-story structure set on a hill. It was situated in a developing area that straddled two counties. We sat on the corner of two roads and could witness over the years the ever-constant march of progress, which in this case took the form of row upon row of cookie-cutter suburban homes being thrown up. The view from the other road, which the other county was in, was a pleasant and consistent view of natural woods and golden fields. My family never fully understood why the more rural county never sold its land for development, and even after attending multiple small town meetings, we never got a clear answer. Reasons ranging from we simple don't need to sell, to this land is straight up cursed, had us scratching our heads and a little worried. Ultimately, after some personal research came up with nothing, we settled the issue and just enjoyed the fact we could relax with a view that included the occasional deer traveling through tall grass, and at night, an owl swooping toward various rodents. There was a downside, however, and that was a drunk speeder. For you see our corner lacked certain signage, and due to that, every once in a while, we would get some crazy stooge under some influence racing by our home at speeds well above the unspoken limit. The loud engine revving they do after hitting that turn caused all of us to have a small moment of still alertness, like prey pausing to check for predators. Not all were lucky though. In the 10 or so years I lived here, I've been privy to at least a dozen crashes through our fence, and one event where a car went and settled into our spare bedroom. The subsequent insurance payouts have been nice for more than just repairs, used to settle debts and pay for the occasional trip. It was simple and dangerous, but it was our life. Now that I look back, I long for those times. The first time I heard that sound, I assumed someone was seriously hurt. At midnight, I was awoken to the loud cry of an individual outside the house. Since my room was on the second floor and had a window overlooking the streets, I raced to see what the commotion was. What I saw caused me to experience equal parts confusion and discomfort. In the middle of the street, about 30 to 40 feet from the house, I could see a rotund clown sitting and crying. He didn't look all that different from your run-of-the-mill type clowns, except the material he was dressed in looked cheap and aged. From what I could see, he didn't look hurt, but was wailing so loudly. When he cried my name out, I instinctively ducked down and hid. How did he know who I was? Did he know me? I don't remember ever meeting him. I peeked over the bottom edge of my window frame. He had stopped crying. Instead, He was staring directly at me, grinning. I raced down the stairs to my parents' room, screaming my head off. My mother and father drowsily came to alertness, realizing my distress. As they wiped their eyes, I stuttered out a panicked depiction of what I had just seen. I could tell they thought I was just experiencing a bad nightmare, but with a reassuring sigh, my dad picked up his metal bat, and my mom armed herself with a small pistol they kept locked up, armed and with flashlights. My parents explored the front of the house, the street, and even some of the area around the property. I stood clinging to the door, panning my view around in frantic motion, comforted only by our little dog, Mitzi. 20 minutes passed when my parents returned and shook their heads, discovering nothing outside. I was escorted back to bed, and what I saw was explained away as just a vivid nightmare or sleep paralysis. But I knew what I saw, and the following night at midnight, I heard that loud wail once again. He appeared every night, always crying and yelling for my name. "Come out," he'd angrily demand. I couldn't sleep, and every time I bothered my parents again about the scary crying clown, I could see their patience deplete. For weeks they'd go out and explore, only to come back with nothing to report. Eventually it broke them, and my dad took me by the arm and dragged me outside to show me once and for all. I was forcefully brought to the middle of that road, and in the bright moonlight, we looked, and there was nothing. I scanned and scanned, but it was quiet. Nothing but the night's cool breeze shifting the plants and trees. I caught my breath for a moment of reassurance, only to hear the rapid jingle of bells, and for that clown to burst out from the bushes and race directly toward me. I yelled and fell upon the cold pavement. My parents had a shocked look of surprise, not at the clown, but by my sudden outburst. I motioned the clown and breathlessly pointed, but they couldn't see him. Instead, they raced toward me, but not before clown could reach me. He grabbed me and with a twisted snarl dug his hands into my body. It burned and stung, like I was being torn into. My vision filled to a blurry white, and I fell unconscious. I awoke to the sound of mechanical rhythmic beeping and murmured speech. I was surrounded by doctors and nurses who were quite relieved at my recovery. Everything fell off, my senses of fuzzy discomfort that slowly worked their way back to some kind of normalcy. I looked to see where the clown had attacked me, and to my surprise, I couldn't spot any wounds. Dr. Ramirez explained that I had a very severe seizure, and was lucky my parents were so close when it happened. I tried to protest and explain I was attacked, but he rebuffed it with a mere explanation. It's on the rarer side, but some people do tend to see things before an epileptic attack. He said, "I know this is traumatic and scary for some of your age, but I assure you we are all here to help. With some proper medicine and a dose of preventative preparation, we can make sure your life will be minimally impacted in the future." He tried to reassure me. I was tired and stressed, so everyone eventually left me to recover for the day in the medical room. The room was large and had 2 other individuals sleeping in beds to my left and right. The TVs that were hanging on the ceiling all had the same channel set and cycled through various cartoons. I explored the room I was in, afraid the clown that attacked me might be present. To my relief, it was just a normal recovery room. I settled in and watched what was on. After a number of hours of show I hadn't seen cycled through the channel. It was like a retro block of entertainment had started, complete with narration. And now it's time for our throwback hour. A cartoon football player would pop up, throw his ball, and the screen would transition to the old show. The screen tore a bit and became a bit fuzzy when the title, "The Jamboree Jigglers," flew up. It was odd. The show played like it was a competitor to the Teletubbies, but with its own cast of colorful characters. There was Mr. Leapy, who liked to jump around whenever something good happened. Mr. Quick, he liked to run around and often got impatient. Ms. Solved, she was a teacher and often led the group to various clues. Lastly, there was a clown, Mr. Tumbles. I immediately felt sick and paranoid when I saw him. He looked exactly like the one who attacked me that night. But I've never seen this show. This is impossible. I watched closely, but all he would do was play games with the others and trip a lot. In fact, his whole gimmick seemed to be that he was clumsy. I didn't want to finish the show and reach for the button to call the nurse. I wanted her to change the channel. I froze. Standing next to me blocking the button was Mr. Tumbles, grinning as he peered down on me. I screamed and fell out of my bed. I scrambled the corner of the room, pushing various objects away from me, desperate to get distance. Mr. Tumbles just silently laughed at me and pulled out a large piece of paper and a marker from his suit. The doctors and nurses rushed in to assist me, and I pleaded that he's there. He's here in this room right now. Yelling my head off, in desperation, they tried to calmly tell me that there was nothing. I even saw some of them pass right through him unintentionally as they moved about the room, looking for him. Mr. Tumbles wrote on the large paper, "I want to play." He wrote some more. "If you do, I won't hurt you again." I was given medication to calm down. I skeptically took it. All I did was stare at him, just standing and pretending to wait until we had some privacy. Like he needed it. He'd jump and celebrate mockingly when the last nurse left the room. As I felt the kick of the pills, I prayed he'd disappear, but was left laying in bed, disappointed as more and more time ticked by. He rushed up and wrote, "So what do you say?" For a brief, lucid moment, I tried to rationalize what was happening, to explain away what was going on with me. "Why me?" I pleaded. "Because you ignored me for so long." He relied through gritted growls. "What do you want?" I asked. He didn't write anything new, but merely tapped on the word play from the other sheet. So I nodded in agreement, and when I awoke after my little nap, our first game of hide and seek began in that hospital. Observing this new behavior of me, Dr. Ramirez assumed and explained to my parents that due to my mental state and trauma, I was developing certain behaviors. He believed it'd go away with time, proper treatment, and therapy. It didn't. For weeks, Mr. Tumble played games with me. At first it was fine. I just set aside an hour or so to play when he demanded it. The longer we spent time together, the more he'd begin to ask at inappropriate times. It went from him stopping me playing video games or doing homework to getting up in the middle of dinner to engage with his fun. Whenever I'd protest, he'd just raise his white-gloved hand as a threat. Play or pain was my choice. This was slowly turning into my own little hell. As the weeks turned to months, it only got worse. The games came at more awkward moments, like in the middle of class. He'd have me play in front of others and made to look like a fool. The demands also began to slowly change. It went from things like tag, hide and seek, hopscotch, and scavenger hunts to stealing a teacher's desk calendar, mixing weird things into my mother's cooking, putting glue into my dog shampoo, and popping my friend's bike tires. From time to time, I would also catch Mr. Tumble's form change. It was only bits here and there like an ear, a finger, or foot, but I knew deep down this clown exterior was not what he truly looked like. Eventually the tasks got violent. First with animals and eventually people. This is getting really mean. I said. I flinched when that hand rose. He smiled and tapped his large paper. "Stab your dad," it read. I refused, shaking my head. I immediately felt that jolt of searing pain rush up my body from my arm. His hands dug into me. It felt like his fingers were under my skin. I blacked out from his horrid touch and awoke a few hours later to my parents tearfully caring for me. Their gaze had a deep look of remorse, and I could hear them blaming themselves for having dragged me outside that one night months ago. They promised over and over they'd never do anything like that again, and that they were going to help me through this. Mr. Tumbles just stood staring angrily behind them. I couldn't rest that day. When I was alone, I begged him to stop with the games and the pain. He just stood there, mouth agape, and stared in disgusted judgment at me. He pulled his marker out and wrote, "One more game." Relief washed over me, and in my excited exhaustion, I agreed, unaware of the nod my head made. Follow the sound of the bell, he wrote. I was told to blindfold myself and to listen for the jingle of his bell. It was late, and I was led to the house, occasionally bumping into walls or furniture. It was quiet. The only thing to protest my movement was Mitzi. She'd stand and press against me like she knew something was wrong, and when I felt grass under my foot, I felt a pit in my stomach. Where was he leading me, I thought. I attempted to pull the blind, but was greeted by the angry, gaunt face of a horribly rotted form. Gone was a clown facade, and what stood was this twisted, tortured form of a gargoyle-like thing. I stood in horror as it laughed, and the bright yellow lights of the car passed through and toward me. Everything burned and broke as I was hit, my body buried under debris and metal. I felt the rasp of my life drift away with every ragged breath. It was warm, then hot, then cold, and my consciousness faded. I awoke in a hospital. My body clung to life. The amount of broken bones, torn muscle, and damaged organs I had draped through a long folded report. I couldn't speak, but my eyes could, and tears streamed from them as I saw my parents rush in. I spent over a year in recovery, fighting to reclaim every part of me. I hadn't seen Mr. Tumbles since that night. The day I returned to school, I was heralded as a hero, and everyone wanted to be my friend, save for one. For every now and then, that one kid acted out, and at the strangest times. But I knew what was really happening. I wasn't going to let him hurt another. Story 10. Unexplained events. When I was a child, my family and I moved to a small town between two big cities. It was a very small town, with few inhabitants, few houses, and few shops. There really wasn't much to do. I was a child, and I didn't get bored easily. My imagination gave me hours and hours of fun. When we arrived at our new house, I noticed that it was a bit old but very beautiful. It had a large porch and a garden so big you couldn't see the end of it at first glance. When I entered the house, I saw that they were still painting the kitchen, the bedrooms, and that's when I realized there was a basement. I didn't even ask my parents if I could go down. Before I knew it, I was already on the stairs, slowly holding onto the wooden handrail that looked like it had been built a long time ago. It seemed very weak. I went down carefully because there was no light, or at least I hadn't found it yet. When I finally reached the bottom, I saw that it was full of stuff. There were heavy-looking metal boxes. I couldn't move with my feet. There was what looked like a very large table with something on top. I kept searching for the light, and when I finally found it, my eyes couldn't believe what they were seeing. On the table lay a strange body, lifeless, dry, and with a dusty, earthy color. It looked like it had been preserved, almost mummified. I had no idea what it was, but one thing I was sure of, it was not human. Its head was huge, its eyes long, and all its limbs were extremely long. It seemed very tall. I just stood there frozen in shock. I don't know if it was out of fear or curiosity. I ran upstairs to tell my parents, but they didn't believe me. I kept repeating over and over, "There's something strange in the basement. Please come." They just kept laughing and saying, "What imagination you have, sweetheart." That night they sent me to my room to sleep, and I had no choice but to obey. The next morning, I went back down to the basement without anyone noticing. I turned on the light, and to my surprise, there was nothing there. It looked like no one had ever been there. The boxes, the table, and that thing on the table were gone. For a moment, I thought I was going crazy. Maybe it had all been my imagination, just like my parents said. Maybe I just needed more rest. I didn't know. I spent the entire day thinking about what had happened tonight, before so many questions and no answers. When night finally came, I stepped out onto the porch and saw, hanging from a distant tree, an old tire swing. I went over, sat on it, and started thinking. Nothing could get that image out of my head. Suddenly, I saw a bright light in the sky, getting closer to me very quickly. I felt a horrible fear and started running toward the house when I felt something lifting me. I was no longer touching the ground. I was being pulled up by that light, and I couldn't do anything to stop it. I tried with all my strength, but it was useless. I heard a loud noise, and suddenly I lost consciousness. That's all I remember from that night. I blacked out and didn't know anything else about myself. I woke up the next morning tucked into my bed, with a horrible headache and a red mark on my wrist. It looked like a symbol or a sign, like a language I had never seen before. I told everything to my parents, and only then did they believe that something strange was happening, that maybe what I had seen in the basement had been real. A week later, we moved out of that house. I left with so many questions in the air, but with a mark on my wrist that wouldn't go away no matter what I did. To this day, I still have too many questions, but of one thing I am certain. Someday, they will come back for me,